Have you ever been asked to give an ACE or a CER response? Well, let's demystify that a little bit today. First of all, they're pretty much the same thing. The first thing we gotta do is answer the claim, which is a factual statement that can be backed up by evidence and reasoning. The second thing that you've got to do is cite evidence, which is using facts, quotes, data, measurements, observations to back up whatever statement that you made. It's the how do you know part, not opinions. In science, we like actual numbers. And then the last part that you have to do is elaborate with reasoning, which gives a little bit more context as to why we saw that evidence happen that you could make the claim on in the first place. These are usually connections to bigger topics, like scientific laws and theories and facts, engineering principles, larger concepts of legality, morality, ethical, economic, social, political type of constructs that build these greater understandings of how the world works. Again, not an opinion, but the facts and the connections that people make often help us to get an idea of what somebody's opinion actually is. So not an opinion statement, but it can be used to guide us into maybe a better idea or a feel for that. Which treat does my dog prefer as an experiment that I could run? And I would say that the resolution to the experiment is that Quigley prefers blueberries to dog treats and crackers. Yes, my majestic beast is very health conscious. How do I know this? Because when given the option between equally sized blueberries, dog treats, and crackers, 4 out of 5 times he chooses the blueberry. So then the bigger question here, right, is that why did this happen? Well, now I've got to dig into the deep psychology of a geriatric Labrador, and what I'm going to go with is that his teeth aren't doing so well because he is 13 years old, and so he either enjoys the flavor of blueberries because he's liked blueberries for a really long time, or maybe they're just easier to chew, and so that's what he is most into. Does a toothpaste flavor affect how often my kids will brush their teeth? Well, my answer to this question would be certainly. My kids seem to brush their teeth more often when they enjoy the flavor of their toothpaste. How do I know? Because when I gathered some evidence, they brushed their teeth 8 times during the week when they rated their toothpaste as not so good, and they brushed their teeth 15 times the week that they said that their toothpaste was quite yummy. So, what's going on? What is the greater reasoning? Diving into child psychology, or just thinking about humans in general. If the toothpaste tastes better, then the brushing experience is a little bit more enjoyable, so you're probably more willing to brush your teeth, right? So making connections, not just restating the claim and restating the evidence, but giving a little bit more. What is the most popular candy bar? So I was at the store the other day, and I was like, I wonder what candy bar the people enjoy the most. Well, claim, I think that Snickers is the most popular candy bar. Not because I like it, because I don't. My evidence was that when I was at the store, all the Snickers were gone, whereas the other candy bar containers were pretty full. And so why does this happen? Well, people must buy a whole lot of Snickers bars because it's empty, which must mean that they like them. When we want to make a CER statement based on a graph, we need to look at the relationship between the two sides on the graph, right? And use actual numbers to support our statement. And so what I'm going to say is that when the ramp height is increased, the time to the bottom decreases. My evidence for this is that when the ramp was only 2 centimeters high, it took the object 5 seconds to reach the bottom. But when the ramp was 10 centimeters high, it only took the ball 1 second to reach the bottom. And so in this case, our evidence needs to be very specific and look at the 2 most kind of extreme points of our data set to really illustrate our claim that when the ramp height increases, the time to the bottom decreases. The reasoning is not a restatement again. It's thinking about deeper scientific principles. And so one of the things that we have learned is as something gets higher and higher off the ground, it builds more and more gravitational potential energy. And so if something contains more energy, then it can change what it's doing more rapidly. And so you would expect something higher off of the ground to move faster. So So finally, looking at the video lab about temperature's effect on solubility, the claim that we're going to make is as temperature increases, because that's what we did, we increased the temperature, the amount of salt that dissolves is going to either increase, decrease, or stay the same. And so we're going to, put that into a sentence to make a data-based claim statement about those two variables. And then the same thing as the temperature increases, the amount of sugar that dissolves is going to increase, decrease, or stay the same. For our evidence, at whatever temperature, degrees Fahrenheit, a certain amount of salt will dissolve, and at a different degrees Fahrenheit, a different amount of salt would dissolve, or maybe the same amount, but that would then back up our claim statement, right? So we want to use a low temperature and a high temperature. And then we would want to repeat that with the sugar statements as well. So at a low Fahrenheit, a certain amount of sugar dissolved, and at a higher Fahrenheit, a certain amount of sugar dissolved. And so then for our reasoning, we're going to think about how particles behave as heat is added. And then think about how particle motion with change in heat might affect the game of hide and go seek that happens during a dissolving situation. Okay, so this claim evidence reasoning, or answer cite explain, will help you to ensure that when you answer questions and you make statements about data and about things happening in the world, that you communicate your findings in a way that makes you sound very, very knowledgeable, because you're always backing it up with reasoning and connecting it to bigger concepts.